Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Anthony Kraus, and on behalf of OTC Markets, as well as our co-host, Zach Smallcap Research, we're very pleased you have joined us for our next live presentation from Unicycive Therapeutics. Please note, you can submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I am very pleased to welcome Dr. Shalabh Gupta, Founder, Chief Executive Officer, and President of Unicycive Therapeutics, Inc., which trades on Nasdaq under the symbol UNCY. Welcome, Shalabh.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Thank you for your time, and really appreciate this opportunity to present Unicycive's story to you. I will be making some forward-looking statements, so I'll encourage you to review this slide before considering any investment decision. My name is Shalabh Gupta. You heard that before. By way of I'm a physician, I will be walking through this presentation, which is 30 minutes in duration. I am using the slide deck that is available on a corporate website. My focus for first several minutes will be on a lead drug, which is oxylanthanum carbonate. Towards the end, I'll provide you some update on corporate side as well as on our second drug. And the last 5 minutes I'll use for Q&A, 5 to 7 minutes, depending on the questions that are being asked. So with that background, I want to share with you our story. Our lead drug is currently filed with the US FDA. It is a process called New Drug Application, also known as NDA. It is the last stage in regulatory filing. We expect to hear back from the FDA by early November. If approved, our drug addresses over $1 billion market opportunity in the United States. I will be focusing my attention and giving you background and context of why we believe there is an opportunity for this drug to provide solutions to both physicians and patients and also create an opportunity for investors. We are backed by a team that has been there, done that before, both on regulatory side. We have had a team that has got multiple FDA drug approvals, and also on commercial side by background of launching the drug in this particular class of therapies. We have a second drug that is focused on acute kidney injury as well as chronic kidney diseases. This drug, UNI-494, currently is undergoing phase 1 clinical trial in the UK, and I'll provide you some update on that as well. With that background, I will walk you through some of the slides, and my goal would be not to read the slide, but to provide you context and background as and when necessary using the slides. So we talked about the lead drug. I want to walk you through the market opportunity on the drug. So our drug is called oxylanthanum carbonate. Let's just talk for a few minutes. What is the market opportunity? Our drug addresses a disease condition called hyperphosphatemia. It may be complication that arise from chronic kidney disease. A minute about chronic kidney disease. Roughly 15% of US population, that is roughly 37 million people in the United States, suffer from chronic kidney disease. Chronic kidney diseases are divided into stage 1 through stage 5. As most diseases in medicine, stage 1 is early on in disease condition, or as the patients progress, they go to stage 5. Stage 5 is the last stage of chronic kidney disease. It's also known as ESRD, end-stage renal disease. More recently, it is called end-stage kidney disease, or ESKD. Most of the patients who are in stage 5 are on dialysis. Dialysis, specifically hemodialysis, that is, you may have seen the dialysis centers when you drive around the town all over the US. Dialysis machines take care of a lot of problems and lots of toxins, but they do not take care of one particular problem that is called phosphate. There are roughly 500,000 patients in the US who suffer from, who are undergoing hemodialysis or dialysis every year. 80% of them, that's 400,000 patients, need something to manage their phosphate. So it's a big problem. 400,000 patients need something to manage their phosphate level, and this is where our drug plays a role, potentially plays a role upon approval. You may ask your friend, your neighbor, your doctor, Doctor, what is this phosphate? I've never heard about this before, and that will be correct. Patients who have normal kidney function or people who have normal kidney functions, they do not need to worry about their phosphate level. It is the patients who are suffering from chronic kidney disease, they have deteriorating kidney function, and because of that, they cannot excrete phosphate. Phosphate combines with calcium and causes two major problems. Number one is cardiovascular problem or mortality and morbidity. So calcium and phosphate combine together and they end up in causing plaques, which are uh, making the arteries or blood vessel in the body uh, stiff like lead pipe. And as you can imagine, if the blood vessels are stiff, the blood cannot be circulated, pumped, and therefore high phosphate by combining with calcium causes blood vessels to thicken, which in turn is called atherosclerosis and causes coronary artery disease, cardiovascular mortality and morbidity. That is what you see in this slide here. The second problem happens, the same calcium and phosphate combination then goes into the bones and soft tissue, causes bony deposition in soft tissue as well as causes fracture. So increasing phosphate level is not a trivial biochemical abnormality. It is something that we need to manage. It causes a huge morbidity risk. As you see with 1 milligram per deciliter increase in serum phosphate, patients have an increased probability of death, 15 to 20%. But more importantly, they also cause increase in hospitalization. In other words, it is something that we need to worry about, we need to take care of. This slide gives you a background about what is the current landscape in terms of treatment of hyperphosphatemia. Roughly 75% of US population, over course of last several years, has not been able to achieve their target phosphate level. So I started by telling you there is a 37 million patients in the US suffer from chronic kidney disease. Then I shared with you there are 500,000 patients who are on dialysis. Of those 500,000 patients, 400,000 patients need a treatment for their phosphate. Now, what you see here, there's 75% of these patients, not today, not yesterday, not last 1 year, but over a decade plus duration have not been able to achieve treatment, a goal. And the question is why? And that is one thing which I want to then tell you. Perhaps this starts to set the stage why oxylanthanum carbonate solves that problem. The biggest challenge for these patients is pill burden. Most of these patients are taking between 20 to 30 pills. Half of those pills come from treatment of hyperphosphatemia. Allow me to walk you through the scenario, and you may say 20 to 30 pills, so what is such a big deal? And that is how it seems at the superficial level. These patients are taking 20 to 30 pills, not for a day, not for a week, not for a month. They're taking for the rest of their life. If I were to ask one of you in the audience to take 30 pills, 20 to 30 pills per day, even for a week, you would find it really, really hard. I'm not making a judgment. I'm telling you as a physician, I've practiced medicine for decades. Patients want to do the very best they can do for their health care. Physicians want to give them the medicine that best addresses the problem. But what if you have a scenario where a patient has to take 30 pills per day, and many of these pills are taking 2 to 3 times a day? In other words, we are asking patients to take 10 pills with each meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that becomes a problem. Of the entire number of pills they take, majority of them are coming from treatment of hyperphosphatemia. So pill burden becomes the number one problem for these patients. Therefore, they are not able to take their medication. And therefore, what you saw, which was 75% of these patients do not meet their target goal. So with that, let me provide you a little bit of more color about what is our drug. Our drug is based on nanoparticle technology. It was a drug that was built upon the thesis that by using nanoparticle technology, we can make pill sizes smaller. By making pill sizes smaller, we provide an opportunity for patients to take pills that they can swallow. And these are small size pills. And we also are able to decrease the number of pills. Our drug is protected by composition of matter patent, are the biggest form of patents in biotechnology industry. We have developed this drug over the last decade plus and millions of dollars in investment. And now we have a drug form that can be taken 3 times a day. Most of these pills are taken along with the meal, not all, but most of them are taken along with the meal. And the patients take 3 pills per day. With each meal, they take 1 pill. And specifically, our pill comes in 3 different doses form, 500, 750 milligram, and 1000 milligram. And I'll walk you through more data as we go forward. This is the starting dose of all the approved medications. Our drug, which is in purple bar, is not approved. So I want to call out the comparison is made with the approved drug. And that you know very well that starting out, these patients are taking the drug. Many of them are taking 6 pills per day, some pills per day, and there are others which go even more in number. These are starting dose. Most of the patients are on drugs like Renvela, taking 9 to 12 pills per day. In fact, some of them taking to 15 pills per day. This is where the problem starts to happen, that if you ask patients to take 15 pills per day, that is 5 pills with each means, they are not able to take them. In the bottom two boxes, you will see one in a brown color, the other one in white color. These are the two drugs that are available that are number of pills. And the reason I bring this up, because if you look at the size here, the number, you see there are other pills that are larger in number, but the smaller number of these pills, they have another problem, which is that these are large size pills. And you may not be able to appreciate these pills here within a slide deck, but if I show you a virtual physical size of the pill, you would realize these are really large size pills. They taste horrible, and these small number of pills require patients to chew the pill. In fact, if patients don't chew the pill, the drug is not efficacious. These pills, these are in the bottom two boxes. One is Velphoro, the other one is Fosrenol. They taste metallic, even though one can add different types of flavor to it, but at the end of the day, we are giving metal for patients to chew it. Imagine for a second that you have to chew an iron pill that tastes like iron 3 times a day. Every time you take a meal, you have to chew this pill. And you can imagine what happens next, that most of these patients are not able to take this pills. So that is the problem, and that is where the market opportunity lies. I will provide you next few slides the data to show you how, based on the clinical and the scientific data, we believe we have potential best-in-class drug. A word about regulatory pathway. We have done 3 clinical trials. We met with the FDA mid to late last year, and we had provided the full dossier to FDA. FDA asked us to run a clinical trial. This was the last clinical trial the agency wanted us to do. Prior to this clinical trial that we did very recently and provided the data in June, we ran 2 clinical trials. The first phase 1 clinical trial was different doses. The healthy volunteers were given different doses, and we were looking for tolerability. The drug is very well tolerated, as we saw in phase 1. Then we ran an efficacy-focused trial that was comparing our drug vis-a-vis another approved lanthanum-based drug called Fosrenol, and we showed that our drug has similar in efficacy when given to healthy volunteers by looking at the urinary excretion level of phosphate, both with our drug versus what we see with Fosrenol. And the guidance from FDA is that it has to be within plus minus 20% for the reference sec, and that's what we showed, and that's where we met our primary endpoint. The most recent trial is the one that I'll provide you some data from, was to evaluate tolerability. FDA asked us to evaluate tolerability for the drug in patients, so we gave the drug to patients, and this was drug given over a few weeks duration. I'll provide you the data, walk you through more background about the clinical trial. The ask from FDA was to evaluate tolerability, and in order to evaluate tolerability, the best way to describe tolerability for FDA purposes is that you are looking for discontinuation. In other words, when the drug is given in clinically effective dose, how many patients after taking the drug for a period of time need to discontinue? Our primary endpoint for tolerability, which is measured by discontinuation rate, was 6%. Our drug is based out of lanthanum. A predecessor drug that was approved by the FDA is called Fosrenol, which was approved in 2004. In order for us to get through the regulatory approval pathway, we are following a 505(b)(2) pathway, which essentially means that we need to compare ourselves to the reference drug. And I bring this context and background to tell you that our drug showed 6% discontinuation rate in the clinical trial, while the approved drug, that is Fosrenol, has on its label 14% discontinuation rate. Our clinical trial that was done this time was not designed for looking for efficacy. However, in order to evaluate tolerability, the drug had to be at a clinically meaningful dose. Clinically meaningful dose in this trial was defined as something that will bring down the serum phosphate below 5.5 milligram per deciliter. For those of you who are listening to the story for the first time, or for those who have heard this before, as a reminder, this class of drug does not have a fixed dose. In other words, a patient's serum phosphate level is the measure that you, based on that, you give the dose. The drug gets started at 500 milligram 3 times a day, but some patients will need higher dose, some patients need even higher dose, and the potential doses that we tested were 500 milligram 3 times a day, up to 1,000 milligram 3 times a day. As it relates to discontinuation rate, we already talked about is 6% versus 14%. The other part that we observed was adverse event. I've often talked to people that any drug, when taken, causes some sort of side effect. So this entire class of phosphate-lowering drugs have gastrointestinal side effects or GI side effects. Our drug in this trial showed diarrhea of 9% and vomiting of 6%. Without having a context about what is the side effect profile or adverse event profile for other drugs, you may not be able to appreciate. So I wanted to provide you this slide, which is package insert of all approved drugs in this class that are currently on the market. And what you would see, the extreme left is a drug called Fosrenol. This is a drug which is, our drug is based on, because we have taken lanthanum, which is a key ingredient in Fosrenol, and made it using nanoparticle technology in a form that patients can take it with a smaller pills that they can swallow versus having to take large size pills that were originally available by Fosrenol or with Fosrenol that require patients to chew the pill. So if you look at this adverse event profile of all the approved drugs, what you find, Fosrenol of all the approved drugs is one of the lowest adverse event profile. Our drug showed better profile than the Fosrenol in the clinical trial. More importantly, I want to focus on one drug here. That drug is Renvela. Renvela and Renagel constitute roughly 50+% of market share today in the US and in global market opportunity. Compared to Renvela, our drug OLC in the clinical trial has less than half of GI side effect. And just to show you, ask you to take a look at the Renvela side effect profile here and just go back to site for a second here. And the reason I wanted to provide you this, that drug is well tolerated. I would caution this was a smaller clinical trial. It was originally designed to be 60 patient. Goal was to evaluate 60 patients. We ended up in having 71 patients who went through the full trial for evaluable patient population, and 85 patients were given the drug, and that's where there are two different denominators, which we won't have gone into detail at the moment. But the part was that we did more than 60 patients that FDA asked us to evaluate. We ended up in evaluating 71 patients because we didn't want to finish the trial and realize that we have less number of patients than we were required to evaluate. I started by giving you background. This trial was not designed for efficacy, which is the case. Having said that, I also mentioned to you, in order to evaluate the tolerability, we had to evaluate the efficacy of drug. It has to be clinically efficacious. So there are two parts here, baseline and end of titration. And I want to take a few minutes to tell you why this particular slide means so much to me and so much to us as a company. The patients who were evaluated in this last clinical trial, they had to be on a standard of care. A standard of care means that they had to be on any and all available drugs that are on the market. We did not want to pick and choose. The only requirement was the patients could not be in Fosrenol, because if they were on lanthanum drug before, it could be adverse event profile that may overlap with our drug and we would not know. So in other words, these patients were given a standard of care. They had to be on the standard of care for at least 6 months. And what you see that based on the maximum tolerated dose that was given as standard of care, only 60% of these patients achieved their serum phosphate level. After giving our drug, and only after 6 weeks of titration, because titration could be up to 6 weeks, so they could not be getting more than 6 weeks. After giving up to 6 weeks of drug administration, what you find is 60% efficacy moved to 90% efficacy, which is quite impressive and remarkable. Saying it differently, the 40% patients who entered into this clinical trial were not able to achieve their target serum phosphate level. We were able to bring down that 40% efficacy, the lack of efficacy, to less than 10% or 10%. These results are remarkable to us for three reasons. Number one, we had an idea. We know that fosrenol, which is based out of lanthanum, has potentially the most potent efficacy, but they're moving the needle from 60% to 90% is remarkable to us. Number two, this duration was only 6 weeks. Number three, these are not patients who are easy to treat. These are, for lack of a better word, they were stratified. These are the patients which are hard to treat. So these are not the patients who are on dialysis and they are easier to manage. So these are hard to treat patients. With 6 weeks of duration, we were able to move the needle for them from 60% to 90%. So that was impressive to us. Even more interesting and impressive part was that we were able to achieve 69% of these patients with the serum phosphate target level with only 1500 milligram doses. I started and have provided you background that many of these patients were given the 500 milligram tablet 3 times a day. Some were given up to 500 milligram tablet, 2 tablets. So that will be 2000 milligram total, or if they got 1000 milligram 3 times a day, that will be 6 tablets. So that will be 1000 milligram 3 times a day. But what you see, majority of these patients were able to be managed by 3 small tests of OLC. The size of oxylanthanum carbonate pills are very small. They are similar to the size of a baby aspirin. And if you go back to the previous discussion, we talked about that pill burden is a big problem. So we feel this data helps us to think about the commercial opportunity to bring this drug to market and be able to address majority of patients with small pills, which could solve problem for these patients. We did a patient satisfaction score, and what you find here, the data is impressive, not only tolerability, not only efficacy, but also patient preference. Majority of patients said, and I'm not going to read the slide, that they would have preferred to have a drug like this. With that background, I want to just talk briefly about where we want to focus our next few months. So we talked about hearing back from FDA early November. From now till the approval timeline, we are focused on launching the drug. Nephrology space, which is where this drug is indicated, is a more focused approach to be able to commercialize the drug. We'll talk more about this as we go further in the next few months. But we are working with the payers. We are working with physicians. That bring this drug to market. We have a team that, so we know we can build this force and sales force that is necessary to bring the drug to market. We have intellectual property status, which covers with a potential extension to patent term extension up to 2035. It is very well covered by patents. Moving on very briefly over next 2 or 3 months on the second drug. The second drug is focused on acute kidney injury. This is a drug that is based out of a approved drug. The approved drug is currently marketed in Europe, Australia, and Japan, called Nicorandil. It's a prodrug of the approved drug Nicorandil. Currently, we are running a phase 1 clinical trial. We expect to finish phase 1 clinical trial, bring the drug to the US, and then talk more about the drug in terms of how do we think about the development next year. So I talked about it. This is a modification of approved drug. Again, it's a de-risk regulatory strategy. Quickly walking you through a few more slides here, just to tell you the drug has been, the approved drug, which is Nicorandil, has been tested before, but we used UNI-494 and ran preclinical data to see how does the drug operate. And these are preclinical data. Um, we've talked about the phase 1 clinical trial is ongoing. The first part of the clinical trial is done, and the second part is currently finishing up. A little bit about the corporate overview, and then we jump right into Q&A. We have a team. We call a small and mighty team. We have a team of individuals who have been instrumental to build the drug and file for our NDA regulatory approval, which we did, and now we are focused on launching the drug. We have a scientific advisory board, which is who's who in kidney space, and these are the folks who have been part of multiple drug approvals in the past, and have been in the clinical development and clinical trials over the last few decades. A few words on our balance sheet. We reported roughly $42 million in cash end of Q2. We have, this is a market cap. I won't go into this, but we have some of the most well-known name in healthcare as our investors, and we feel really, really proud to be able to bring this far the drug, and we are steadfastly focused on advancing the drug further. The last part is this expected catalysts that are coming up in next few months. So we mentioned earlier that we have filed NDA. We expect to hear back from a FDA in terms of a potential approval date by early November. That will set the clock for approval. We will provide more update on phase 1 clinical trial for second drug. And in the meantime, we are starting to focus our commercialization effort. And we believe sometime next year, this unknown to some about a potential reimbursement strategy, which is called TDAPA from the CMS, becomes clear. As of now, January 1, 2025, these phosphate binders and phosphate lowering drugs are supposed to go into bundle. And the first 2 years of that period, first 2 to 3 years of that period is called TDAPA, which is a transition period where Medicare Part D providers, the drug will go into Part B. We believe there is an opportunity for OLC to be part of that Part B program, and that allows us to be able to provide the drug to many more patients than currently possible. So we have a number of milestones coming up in the near future. With that, if there is any other question, we talked about it, you can reach out to us. We will be happy to answer your questions. I am just reading through the questions that are coming up. So, so the first question is that can we talk a little bit about the ownership of the company? We are a publicly traded company. We have a majority of our ownership is by institutional investors. I don't have a specific percentage and name here, but if I move a slide back, it will give you a little bit of color about, 1 second. Let me tell you just, bear with me 1 second. I want to just show you these are our investors. So the bottom row, you see the number of the investors below. The second question relates to the commercial launch strategy. It is a very good question. Give me a minute to just provide you some background about the commercial launch. A drug like ours, which is being launched in the US, we have a good situation because nephrology market is a smaller market opportunity. In terms of the people that you need to sell to. We talked about it. Our lead indication is patients who are on dialysis. There are roughly 7,000 nephrologists who are called kidney doctors in the country. If you put them into a decile, what you find that the top 80% of prescriptions or the top 80% of prescribers of phosphate binders come from a very small number of physicians. We can launch a drug like this in a market in nephrology because it is not a primary care market where you have to go to all the physicians all over the country. It's not so. You can, in fact, have a smaller sales organization and launch it. And Dr. Mazik, who is the head of our corporate strategy, he talks about this, and we can talk more about it. But in order for us to launch the drug, it is not something that will require a huge sales force. We have evaluated it. If you look at 80% of prescribers, that number of physicians is only 2,000 few hundred number of physicians. And again, based on the call frequency and how often a physician would be interacting with a Salesforce person. We know that size of the potential Salesforce. And we have the time from here till the approval to be able to launch the drug. So that's a good question, but we are really excited about it. And we are adding more members to our team as we go on. And the last part I just wanted to mention in the interest of time, we are currently conducting advisory board meetings, both virtual as well as in person, and we are presenting our data in multiple medical conferences in the next few months so that we create more awareness about our drug. And we can provide both the clinical data, publications, and awareness to physicians. So then the drug is approved on the market. We have the ability to provide it to as many patients as possible. So with that, thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest. Really appreciate giving me the chance to provide you a little bit more color and background about our story.